BigCountryPreps.com. I'm Evan Wren, and this is the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, our daily look at an area football team and the key questions we'll be answering about that team in our August 20th preseason preview here at Big Country Preps. I'm with my partner, Dan Youngblood, via Zoom. And tonight, Dan, it is the Hico Tigers.
Yep, we wrap up a really interesting district, 5-2 AD1, with the Tigers team that, like so many others in the area, will have a new head coach this year. Coach Todd Swearingen retired in the offseason, and Britt Hart, who had joined his staff last year, was promoted to the head coaching job, of a position he is quite familiar with, having done it at several other places previously. So they got a veteran coach with a good group back. 12 of their 19 Letterman returns from last year's 5-5 squad, including 6 offensive and 5 defensive starters. And they're going to be relying on call-ups from a 9-1 JV team. So some good young talent coming up. So Coach Hart will have some a good solid squad and some talent to work with in his first year as a head coach there. But they will have some questions to answer if they hope to reach their potential this year, and we'll touch on a few of those here in just a minute.
All right, before we start talking about Hico, we need to remind you folks to please hit the subscribe button on YouTube. It's free, and then also hit that little bell, and you'll get notifications each and every time that Big Country Preps posts a video there. All right, and with that, it's time to talk about Hico. And Dan, fire away with the first of some of our questions about them this year.
And my first question is just about the transition from Coach Swearingen to Coach Hart, and just how smoothly that will go. I would tend to think that having been there a year, that would be a pretty smooth transition. They've been running that unique offense, that hybrid wing tee that he runs now for a year. And he's got some good talent back in that. So I would expect this to go pretty smoothly. The kids are familiar with him. They've seen what he likes to do schematically. But as we mentioned so many times already this season, anytime you have a coaching change, there's going to be, some subtle differences, at least in the way that the different coaches handle things. So I'm just kind of interested to see how that goes, and just how quickly Hico can get to playing their best football this year.
My question about them is now Hico's made a living running the football in recent years, pounding the rock and chewing up clock. And my question is how much you're talking about subtle differences in philosophy. Britt likes to score. He does
Mhm.
like to score. I'm curious about the tempo that they'll run. If they'll run at the same very slow tempo, or if he's going to start picking it up a little bit. And they've got the offensive line to do what it really pretty much whatever they want. They've got a bunch of guys that are over 200 pounds plus. So I'm curious to see more than anything else is about tempo. This was a very slow tempo team and made a living on it. And they did well with it. Will Brett pick up the tempo, or will he kick, or kind of stay where they were? That'll be an interesting thing. And how successful can they be if they go quicker?
Mhm. And it's funny because that kind of leads me into the last question I had, which is they're losing a couple of really good running backs in Buck Powell and Price Mullen, a couple of kids who have just been workhorses for that program over the last several years. We did our preseason feature on those two last year, but the guys who just a two-headed running back monster for them, and they've graduated. So that those are big losses that they're going to have to replace. And I'm just going to interested to see who takes over those roles, and how successful they are. They do return a quality quarterback in Tyler Jackson, a senior kid who's a really good athlete. And like you said, they should be really the lines on both offense and defense should be strengths for them. But the skill positions around those lines, I think, are probably going to be the big question for how good this Hico team can be. They're going to have to answer that, is who's going to be carrying the football, who's going to be catching the football, and I'm just interested to see what that looks like this year for Hico, because if they can find those pieces, and they're going to have some talented kids coming up from that junior varsity team, and some good depth pieces around them. So I'm just interested to see what that looks like this year.
All right, we're going to be taking a look at Heiko's schedule for 2025. But before we do that, we need to thank a few of our sponsors. Beginning with For the Love of the Game Broadcasting, and our old friend Terry Slavens, owner of K-Lakes 93.5 FM out of Brackenridge, 97.7 FM KATX out of Eastland, Classic Country AM 1330 out of Graham, 94.7 FM KWKQ out of Graham, KROO 1430 AM out of Bracken, KWBY 98.5 FM out of Ranger. That is For the Love of the Game Broadcasting. Also, Rob Durham, sales consultant at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac up in Breckenridge. If you're in the market for a new vehicle or a used vehicle, call Rob. He's one of the nicest guys you'll ever want to meet. Give him a shout at 254 559 2266. That's Rob Durham up at Bear Chevrolet Buick Cadillac in Breckenridge. And finally, Cavalry Resources and Construction, located up in Breckenridge, serving the entire big country, offering custom standing seam roofing made on location and all commercial roofing applications. Give Kobe Walker a shout at 254 246 5546. That is Cavalry Resources and Construction in Breckenridge. All right, and with that, it's time to take a peek at Hico's schedule for 2025. We'll start in the non district portion first. August 29th, we'll see Hico on the road to open the season at Rio Vista. They'll return home a week later to face Moody. A road date at Cross Plains will be on September the 12th, followed by a home date with Itasca. That's on the 19th. And then a road date against the Florence Buffaloes. That's going to be on September the 26th. And then they'll dive into the off week.
Yeah, I like that non-district schedule for them, a chance to really gain some confidence and get some momentum heading into district, which
I
opens.
agree. There's some winnable games.
Yeah, there definitely
So,
are. They open district with a really tough one right off the bat, October 10th at De Leon, before coming home to play Bangs on the 17th of October. They then travel to Coleman on the 24th, host Hamilton on Halloween, and then they wrap up their district schedule at Ballinger, sorry, on November 7th. So this is a tough district. There's going to be some really competitive games in there if you hope to make the playoffs. It's going to be this will be an interesting schedule for Hico up and down it.
all right, game of the year for Hico. How do you see it?
There are two that feel like you've got to win probably both if you want to make the playoffs. And to me, that's the Bangs game at home on October 17th, and then that game at Ballinger on November 7th. And Ballinger took a big step forward last year. They're going to be expecting to make the playoffs, and that's the thing I like about this district is I don't think there's a team in this district that doesn't expect to make the playoffs. So it should make for some really competitive football. But for Hico in particular, those two games seem like really large ones for me.
I'm going to stop letting you go first because you just keep stealing my thunder. Keep stealing my thunder. I agree wholeheartedly. Bangs and Ballinger winning those two ball games gets you in the playoffs. And then DeLeon, Coleman, Hamilton are going to be really tough. And then for each one of those that you manage to win, if you're Hico, you get an extra, you get a higher seed. But yeah, I agree with you. Bangs and Ballinger are definitely must wins for Hico.
Yeah, but this should be a really fun district, a really competitive district, and I would expect Hico to be, in the thick of that playoff race toward the end.
All right, and with that, it's about time to wrap up this edition of the Countdown to Two-A-Days series, the Hico Tigers. But before we do that, we want to remind you folks that August 20th is the big day here at Big Country Preps. That's the day that we release our preseason preview. It's going to have the most in-depth look at Big Country football of any media source preseason in the Big Country or throughout the state looking at this area. Don't forget, that's August 20th.
In the meantime, we appreciate you joining us for this episode of our Countdown to Two-A-Days series, and we encourage you to come back tomorrow when we wrap up our look at our 2A programs with the San Saba Armadillos here at BigCountryPreps.com.